Somewhere in the American desert, a massive Air Force base sits completely empty. Its runways still intact. Its buildings still standing. But not a single soul lives there anymore. Somewhere in North Dakota, the US government spent $6 billion building a missile complex and then abandoned it after just 1 year of operation. And somewhere on Long Island, a radar base with sealed underground tunnels has been linked to secret government experiments that the military has never fully explained. These are not conspiracy theories. These are real places. Real bases. Real secrets. Today we are going inside 12 of the most abandoned and forgotten military bases in America. Places where soldiers once lived, trained, and died, and where something still feels very, very wrong. I am your host, and this is Lost America Shadows. Stay until the end because number 1 on this list will genuinely disturb you. We start our journey in Baltimore, Maryland. Fort Armistead was built between 1897 and 1901, constructed specifically to defend the shores of South Baltimore from naval attack. But it was operational for less than 2 decades. When America entered World War I in 1917, the military stripped the fort of all its artillery and shipped the weapons overseas. Just like that, the fort was gutted, emptied, forgotten. Today, Fort Armistead is a local park. You can walk its grounds freely, but the old military structures still stand crumbling silent, watching over the harbor. Locals say that at night near the old gun batteries you can hear strange echoing sounds coming from inside the walls. Whether that is history playing tricks on your mind or something else entirely, we will let you decide. Moving on to Fort Pike, just outside New Orleans, sitting along a strait leading from the Gulf of Mexico. This 19th century army base was built right after the War of 1812. But Fort Pike carries a dark history. The fort served as a prison during the Second Seminole War, where more than 1,000 indigenous Seminole people were held captive before being forcibly relocated. The U.S. Army abandoned the fort in 1890. Then Hurricane Katrina hit in 2005. Then Hurricane Isaac in 2012. Each storm tore the structure apart piece by piece. Today, many people refuse to visit Fort Pike, believing the place is haunted by the suffering that happened within its walls. About 75 miles northeast of Los Angeles, in the middle of the high Mojave Desert, lies George Air Force Base. This was once a thriving military community. Families living here, pilots training here, jets screaming across the desert sky every single day. George AFB was a critical strategic site during World War II, the Korean War, and the Cold War. But in 1992 it was shut down. The families left. The pilots left. The jets left. What remained was a ghost community. Empty houses, empty hangars, empty runways, baking in the desert heat. And then came the other problem. The base was found to be contaminated with toxic chemicals affecting over 100,000 people in the surrounding area. Visitors today report unexplained phenomena inside the empty buildings. Shadows moving where there should be none. Sounds coming from the empty barracks at night. Now in the middle of the Hudson River on a small island called Polopole Island stands Bannerman Castle. This was not originally built by the government. It was constructed by a Scottish immigrant as a military surplus warehouse storing weapons and ammunition left over from the Spanish-American War. Eventually the military began using it. But in 1953 a ferry boat sank nearby, cutting off transportation to the island entirely. The military abandoned it, and then the fires came, and the vandals. Today most of the interior floors have completely collapsed. One entire exterior wall has fallen. The castle sits on its island, crumbling, unreachable, rotting slowly into the river. 60 miles west of Key West, surrounded by nothing but open ocean, sits Fort Jefferson. Construction began in 1846. The goal was to protect American shipping lanes in the Caribbean from pirates and enemy warships. What they built was massive, enormous, a hexagonal fortress rising straight out of the sea. But Fort Jefferson has a dark second chapter. The fort became a prison. During its history, prisoners were held within its walls under brutal conditions, and reports of a prisoner uprising echo through the fort's history to this day. Some visitors claim to hear crying coming from an abandoned elevator shaft deep inside the fort. Construction was actually never fully completed. Workers abandoned the project for reasons that were never fully explained. Standing inside those ancient walls, surrounded by ocean in every direction with no way out, the feeling is unlike anything else in America. Fort Leavenworth in Kansas, established in 1827, is often called the most haunted army base in America. Nearly 2 centuries of battles, civil war skirmishes, and military executions have soaked into the ground here. Fort Leavenworth is unique among all the places on this list because it is not fully abandoned. It still operates today as the only active maximum security military prison in the entire Department of Defense. Think about that. Nearly 200 years of soldiers, prisoners, executions, and war, and the place is still in operation. Guards and staff at the prison have reported unexplained events for decades. Apparitions of soldiers from wars long finished. Voices in empty rooms. Fort Leavenworth. The base that time, and apparently the dead refuse to leave. Most people have never heard of Adak Island. It sits in the middle of the Aleutian Islands chain in Alaska, one of the most remote, most isolated places in the entire United States. The Naval Air Station here was massive, 47,271 acres of military infrastructure sitting in the middle of the Bering Sea. Decommissioned in 1997, transferred in 2004. Today most of the base sits completely abandoned. The buildings are there, the infrastructure is there, but the people are gone. Only a tiny civilian population remains on the island, served by what used to be a military airfield. Standing in the middle of Adak Island with nothing but freezing fog, ocean, and abandoned buildings in every direction, it is one of the loneliest feelings imaginable. A city the size of a small American town. Empty, silent, slowly being reclaimed by the Alaskan wilderness. St. Marie, Montana. Population 200 to 300 people. But once at its Cold War peak, this town had 7,000 residents. It was a full community built around Glasgow Air Force Base. Families, schools, shops. A complete American town that existed for one purpose: supporting the military. And then the base closed. And almost overnight the people left. 7,000 people became 200. Streets full of life became streets full of silence. Houses that once had children playing outside them now stand empty, windows dark, lawns overgrown. St. Marie is one of the most dramatic examples of military abandonment in all of America. An entire community erased. Known as the Gibraltar of the Chesapeake, Fort Monroe was built between 1819 and 1834. It is the largest stone fort ever constructed in the United States. The fort guarded Chesapeake Bay for nearly 2 centuries, playing key roles from the Civil War through the 20th century. 14 American presidents visited Fort Monroe, from Andrew Jackson to Harry Truman. It was decommissioned in 2011 and almost immediately declared a national monument. But Fort Monroe is also deeply haunted, or at least that is what the people who have spent time there believe. Reports of paranormal activity have surrounded the fort for years. Historical figures from America's past are said to still walk its corridors. For a place that witnessed so much American history, so much conflict, so much pain, it would almost be strange if nothing remained. Fort Monroe stands today as both a monument to American military history and a reminder that some things from the past do not simply fade away. Fort McClellan in Alabama is not just abandoned. It is toxic. The base served as a training ground for chemical and biological warfare for decades, and when it closed, the contamination stayed behind. Veterans who were stationed at Fort McClellan have reported serious, devastating health problems, illnesses that doctors have linked to chemical exposure at the base. The list of toxic substances found at Fort McClellan is long and deeply troubling. Fort McClellan stands as one of the most disturbing examples of what can happen when military operations leave consequences that last long after the soldiers go home. The buildings decay, but the contamination remains. This is not just an abandoned base. This is a warning. The United States government spent $6 billion building this. $6 billion. The Nekoma missile complex in North Dakota, also called the Stanley R. Michelson Safeguard Complex, was constructed during the Cold War to protect America from Soviet nuclear missiles. It was one of the most technologically advanced military facilities ever built in the United States. It opened in 1975. It was decommissioned in 1976. 1 year. The government spent $6 billion, built one of the most sophisticated missile defense systems in history, and shut it down after 12 months of operation because Congress decided it was not cost-effective. Today, the Nekoma complex sits on the North Dakota plains, its enormous pyramid structure still standing, still visible from miles away, surrounded by empty land. It was sold to a local county for $1. Now we come to the most disturbing place on this entire list. Camp Hero. Located on the eastern tip of Long Island in Montauk, New York. On the surface it looks like an ordinary decommissioned radar station. A Cold War relic. An old military base converted into a state park. But underneath Camp Hero there are sealed tunnels, underground structures, chambers that the government has never fully explained. The base officially closed in 1984. But for years after the closure, local residents reported seeing lights, hearing machinery, witnessing strange activity at the site despite it being supposedly abandoned. The stories that have emerged from Camp Hero involve classified government experiments, secret underground facilities, and operations so classified that most documentation has never been released. Whether you believe the theories or not, the sealed tunnels are real. The underground structures are real, and the government's silence on what happened inside Camp Hero is very, very real. 12 bases, 12 stories, all of them real. All of them forgotten by most Americans but not by us. If you made it this far, thank you. Subscribe for next video.